Greetings, true believers, and welcome to episode 46 of the Pull List Podcast. That's right, we're back, starting a whole new season with the Love Thy Nerd Podcast Network, and also a return to legacy numbering. Because, let's be honest, that's just how comics work. I don't make the rules, but we are the Pull List Podcast, a bi-weekly show about comics, pop culture, and faith. My name is Chris Poirier, and with me, and still, hopefully, COVID-free, is the one and only Hector. How's it going, my friend? It has been far too long.
Oh, you know, I've grown like 3 feet taller, and my bald spot grew back in, and it's the apocalypse, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that seems about right. But hey, we're back. So strap yourselves in and prepare yourselves, for we've got Comic Sign.
Better put the word out. Get ready for the nerd out. Better put specs on. Better break necks on. I cut handsome checks for my expansion sets.
It's good to be back. On today's episode of The Pull List, we've got a great show for you. We're going to hit the latest news of what you need to know. Our must-pull recommendations from, well, we normally do the last 2 weeks, but it's going to be the last month because, let's be honest, we got to catch up. And our fave new number ones and so much more. This is The Pull List Podcast. So as always, we want to jump right into the newsroom and kind of catch everybody up on industry news. And honestly, there's just been so much stuff going on since we last talked. So we're just going to kind of dive in on what's new, hot, and towards the top of the reels. And man, I don't know about you, Hector, but I feel like just in general, stepping into the comic shop for the last couple weeks, it's felt quiet, even more quiet than usual. I don't know. I mean, we do have some things that are like crazy new. We've got DC doing the whole future state thing, and Marvel's on probably 47,000 copies of X-Men Sword something or other, but
I think all that's gone now, though. All the Sword stuff is over, maybe. Yeah, but maybe. No, now we're back to Null. Now Null is back.
Right. And we're definitely going to have to talk about that at least a little, whether we want to or not. But it's a thing. But I think the thing that really caught me in the last couple weeks is Bendis, his exclusivity at DC has been terminated. It is over. And DC also kind of came out the other side of that period and went, yeah, we don't think we're going to do the exclusive thing anymore with creators. We'll see how long that lasts. But
that's how you know somebody really ruined it. Who peed in the pool?
Right? It's like,
it was Bendis.
Oh, this is why we can't have good, nice things, I suppose. But I'm not sure when he's officially done, but they've at least announced that the exclusivity is going to run out and all of that. I know he has some future state books and all of that, but I don't know what that leaves for in terms of the future of some of his other projects. But we'll keep on top of that for all of you folks that are curious where Bendis is going to end up next and what type of things he's actually going to be writing. So it's curious. It's interesting to say the very least. But I mean, I'm taking the over-under right now that probably the end of exclusivity seems like a very definite moment in time, but I don't see them sticking to that. I feel like we go in ebbs and flows with that kind of thing. What else? Oh yes, Marvel has their 2021 event slated. I'm not sure if you've heard this, Hector, if you have some feelings, but Marvel's Heroes Reborn is technically back, but is going to be different because they did this once upon a time before, but they've slated their first major event for 2021 to be Heroes Reborn. And how do I put this nicely? It looks a lot like Future State. That basically the Avengers are dead and or, you know, displaced in multiverse, et cetera, you know, insert the Avengers aren't here trope of choice, and that a new series of superheroes must rise.
Well,
so
for all the bluster that came with Future State's pre-discussion, like the news ahead of time, dude, yeah, there's some fresh faces, but like all the old faces are still here. Like they're just
right, and that's
wearing different
that's what's
masks.
really interesting, and save it for the podcast for a little later because we're gonna talk a lot about Future State, I think. But I think that's fair and maybe that's a really good point for this Marvel announcement is that the announcement might not necessarily line up with the thing you get. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Because I was kind of down on Future State and then I started reading it and went, oh, you horribly mismarketed this, but yeah, we'll get back to that. So, what else? Oh, Kevin Eastman apparently had a whole bunch of work already done when he was ousted at Heavy Metal, and he didn't have a place for it to land. But because it was his stuff, he is coming forth at IDW a little later in March with Kevin Eastman's Twisted Tales. So, kind of deep into the brain of our turtle friend on non-turtley things, he had some stuff that was more heavy metal type stuff that he had prepared before they kind of randomly just invited him not to come back to work one day, which is still unfortunate, but here we are. But IDW is going to pick up that bad boy, and we're going to see some more Kevin Eastman exclusive stuff as his Twisted Tales a little later in the spring. So if you're into Eastman's kind of heavy metal side and or you weren't aware that it existed and he did something other than Turtles, well, then you should check it out because that guy can get pretty wild. And I'm kind of curious where that whole thing's going to go.
I grew up with heavy metal, but I also grew up with heavy metal being the thing of, I'm not watching this or reading this. So like I'm open to it, but like the only reason I would give it a shot is because it is Kevin Eastman. So, yeah.
I think that's fair. And I mean, heavy metal is really kind of specific. Is kind of out there. It's always been designed to kind of be out there. So, yeah, it's not going to be for everyone. Maybe I should preface that just because you like the Turtles, maybe you won't like this. But if you at least want to see how the other half lives, as it were, then it might be worth a little journey on the wild side because it probably promises to be kind of out there. And for those of you that are familiar with Heavy Metal Magazine and whatnot, they already know what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, and Kevin doing all of his own art and all that is just something I always look forward to because he has a very specific style. So it's probably going to be bonkers, but it's going to be Kevin Eastman.
And that's good.
And so, yeah, and that can be good. So I have two questions for you.
Go.
One of them you're going to be way more excited about than the second one. Or no, I'll save the good one for last. Did you at any point in the last 20-something years feel the need for a brand new Spawn character?
Like a side character? Or like a new person?
Todd McFarlane's Spawn.
Yeah.
Issue 315, whether you wanted it or not, he is introducing a brand new significant player in the Spawn universe that is being aptly named the Plague.
I mean, all the Spawn characters, kind of fit well, but like they honestly more often than not feel like the generic bad guys or good guys in like knockoff video game sequels. Like, what's that game?
And
the sequel, Darkstalkers? Not which one? Which one's the one where you play Death as Death and you like run around? Either way, like there's these like generic heaven hell bad guys and stuff, and most of the ones because I picked up Spawn 300 just to read it, and throw my money at Todd. For the support of reaching that. And I'm like, I picked it up, looked at all the characters, and I'm like, yep, it looks exactly like what I thought. Okay.
That happened. And I mean, credit still where credit is due that Spawn is one of the longest running non-interrupted continuities in comics. That it's not just 300 straight issues. It's nobody's died and been brought back. It's not been renumbered. That I believe him and Savage Dragon, so both Image properties, still hold the titles for longest running uninterrupted continuity. And there's something to be said for that. But yes, 2020 has bore out that 2021 will bring you the plague. So you're welcome, from the mind of Todd McFarlane. So the second question, much more important. Hector, are you ready for cons to be back?
Ready's a figurative word.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
There are, in some areas, especially in the South, some cons never stopped. Like they sort of kept going. I had a con the day the world shut down. I was at a con, and like that same con said, you know what, we're happening in September. And then that same con is happening in like a month or so, and they've gotten a bigger convention center. And to be fair, everybody had to wear a mask unless you said no.
Of course.
And like, it's like,
I'm a little confused by the requirement.
Yeah, that's the thing. We were told all vendors have to wear masks, and then one vendor said no. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, what?
What do you that? All right. Well, that's a thing.
But no, I'm ready. In a sense, and it's been like a weird bubble for me because like I spend all year writing to like publish a book in May and then tour it around cons and see all my people and do all this stuff. And like after, spending October through March of 2019 and 2020 to publish a book in a pandemic and go to no cons was like, oh, everything sucks now. I've got friends that I've got friends I haven't seen in over a year. I still have money floating out for booths that I paid for in 2019.
Yee.
Like, and I'm not saying this is a negative towards them. It's just the way the world worked. But,
yeah, sure. No.
Heroes Con, Galaxy Con, South Carolina Comic Con, all are $300 for the cheapest artist table. And I've got, just in those three shows, $900 floating in the ether. And I'm just like, I don't know if you're happening ever. So, so what do you think? Like, I want them to be there and I want them to be, safe and accessible. But like, what's your take? Where are you at?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I've left an article, and it'll be available in the show notes for everyone, that has a list of everything that is currently on the slate for 2021. And it's a lot. Now, it doesn't differentiate between online shows, hybrid shows, which seem to be a thing this year, that some places are like, we're going to do something, but it's going to be scaled back with following local requirements, masks, etc., considerations for vaccines and whatnot. That there's a lot of different precautions on the table and options on the table. But the main thing is that obviously we want people to be safe, right? And we're still feeling our way through that. Some places have more access to the vaccine than others. Like me personally, I'm currently on they're like, we'll get to you when we get to you.
And so my wife's about to take her second dose. But right. She's a medical personnel.
But we also have friends that are in other states that are just in the middle of nowhere that are like, yep, we're signed up. We're getting it tomorrow. I'm like, you literally live in a smaller town than I do. And we literally have like 500 doses available locally right now. And there's 200,000 of us. So we're like, cool, we'll get around to it. So it's weird. But yeah, we just wanted to provide folks some of the information so they can see because it includes all the way down to fairly regional cons. It's a pretty exhaustive list. I was pretty impressed. I think South Carolina is on the list when I flipped through it real quick.
Yeah.
So it's an option so you can at least see what's out there, what they're going to be doing for safety, if they're going to be online, if they're going to be hybrid. And it's mostly because, yeah, Hector and I both are in that similar boat of we've got folks that we haven't seen in over a year. We miss people like dearly. And we had the opportunity back in October through LTN Con to basically invite our friends to come hang out with us online for a weekend. And that was cool, but it's still not the same as seeing folks. But
which on that
2021
note, though, LTN Con, after doing all the online cons that I've done since, 2020, I think LTN Con still handled everything the best of every online show I've done. So just a side note.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, and no, nobody paid us to say that, even though we're here and we love LTN and everything. But there is something to be said when something is done well that, you call it out, and that was good. So hopefully a lot of other shows take advantage of the technology, do things safe, but maybe late this year we actually get to see some of our fams in earnest, but we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess. But I wanted to provide that to you because it's a very long, exhaustive list, and you can find out at least what's going on around you and make the determinations that are right for you, because we want everybody to be safe. But I wanted to give you some of that information, and
I still think we're going to be...
That's where we're at. Yeah.
At a place of 2 years before it's... Let's say COVID's gone. Let's say it's eradicated. Or, we're all vaccinated up, whatever. Let's say COVID's not a factor. I still think we're going to look at a solid 2 years before we're even close to back to normal across the board. Just because, honestly, think about Heroes Con, Galaxy Con, any of these big shows you've been to.
Sure.
Imagine being in the line right before the show opens, and you're pressed
just the line
to get inside the Coliseum or wherever else. You're pressed chest to chest, back to back with some sweaty cosplayer who smells delicious, and whatever else. And behind you've got a dude rolling a wagon full of comic books, but it's like being crammed in a subway tunnel. And you're all moving in the same direction, and you're literally elbows reach or less from someone else for hours, and you're underground. Dude, I think the amount of PTSD that's going to be associated with this is going to take years to come by.
It's a valid point that we are not used to being that friendly as we have been in our cons past. So it's gonna be a journey, to say the very least. So stay safe, wear your mask, and bring hand sanitizer with you places, because that stuff is gold. It's good for you. Wash your hands. So yeah, that's what we've got for the news so far. We know that it's been kind of a catching back up and whatnot, and so be keeping an eye out, because we want to be able to bring that to you on that bi-weekly and have that good look at the industry, delivering you all the inside knowledge. And as always, you can join in this conversation with Hector and I instead of just listening to us, even though our voices are amazing. You and your nerdy friends can come over to the Love Thy Nerd Discord. We have a Discord now. I think Hector has taken the time off to learn how to Discord, because... maybe not, but we have a Discord and we have a comics channel, and we go and talk about geeky stuff there all day long. So the link's available in the show notes. So come and hang out with us and have all of that joy of all of your nerdy friends just screaming into the ether at each other of all the things that are nerdy.
What up, nerd? Thank you for listening to this podcast from the Love Thy Nerd Podcast Network. We hope you're enjoying it. But hey, did you know that Love Thy Nerd airs almost all of its podcasts first on LTN Radio? That's right. LTN Radio is your home for the best Christian rock, rap, pop, and indie music. And it's also the place to go to hear Love Thy Nerd's content before it reaches the podcast feed. In addition to that, Love Thy Nerd creates a lot of content that's exclusive to LTN Radio that you're missing out on. So go check out ltnonair.com and listen for yourself. You can also download the Live 365 app on your smartphone and search and favorite LTN Radio, or enable the LTN Radio skill on your Echo devices and simply ask Alexa to play Love Thy Nerd. Now let's get you back to that podcast.
And that brings us to the polls for January. We said at the top of the show we're not going to do our normal 2 weeks, but we want to talk about kind of our top 4 things from the month, just catching everybody up and everything. So, Hector, how about you regale us with what you found deep in your pull list and think that our wonderful viewers should be reading as well?
So, going off the whole month of January and just looking at that, for the record, mine is Marvel or as DC heavy because Chris took the good Marvel books. They were picked before I even had the chance, so whatever.
It's not like we're gonna talk about it together.
Out the gate, I've purchased every Future State book so far. Let's say that.
This is my shocked face, which none of you can see.
Yeah. I've purchased every one just for the sake of it. I did the same thing with 52, and but just because I'm interested to give it a shot. But that being said, out of the first batch of Future State, my favorite, and I saw other talk about this too. I think Todd Turner mentioned it in the community as well. But that Wonder Woman #1 was flippin' delightful. And I highly recommend, if you do nothing else, you literally have to have no knowledge of Wonder Woman or of death metal. And which, by the way, I don't love that Future State comes out of death metal.
I actually agree with you on that. That was one of the things that honestly up front I was kind of like, I don't want to play. I don't actually care that much. That sure, Scott went on a fever dream of telling an absolutely bonkers story, and Capullo got to draw it, and both of them were like super excited about the thing, but I kind of lost
Metal
interest.
Was wonderful. I enjoyed Metal as a Elseworlds fun, yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon type situation.
Right.
But it being the basis of all like DC side continuity was rough for me. I didn't like that transition. And I don't feel like people were adequately prepared, even though Future State is temporary, which honestly, on my side note, I actually wouldn't be mad if Future State was permanent or at least took a year.
So let me interject a rabbit trail to your rabbit trail. I can't help but wonder, based on how this got originally stood up, and they were like, oh, it's only going to be like a book or two. And then suddenly it became a full-scale event, but that, like you said, it was going to be limited. I would not be surprised that if this sells through well, that it does not go away.
Yeah. Well, it's selling
that's
well
my
enough.
That's my honest opinion. Is I think DC's just testing the water because they're reacting to everyone's reaction to the whole 5G thing, and that was super negative, and this feels a lot like it.
Well, this is 5G,
but right, and that's kind of the point. Is that now that people have it in their hands, and this isn't actually, again, like I said at the top of the show, not what we were sold. There's some pieces that have that feel to it, but it's much better than I expected. So yes, continue.
We were talking like it was, for the most part, we were talking like it was all some like far off thing. Dude, most of these stories take place in 10 years. Like,
right.
Like Dick Grayson still fits in the Nightwing outfit. Come on. But all that being said, I feel like we weren't properly prepared with death metal to say that, hey, you're going to need to know what happens because it's going to reshape the entire DC universe. Nobody was ready for that. Nobody thought, hey, this is an important key book that's actually going to dictate comic books for at least a couple months. Blah. They've done a good job of putting a blurb at the beginning of every issue, but I'm also annoyed that they have to put a blurb at the beginning of every issue. Again,
I honestly read that and went, cool. I don't know what happened, but I'm good.
Because we're far enough past it, I'm going to say this, and I don't consider this a spoiler because it's actually in the thing, because I do need to hit on this. Wonder Woman dies to reset the multiverse creation. And what we have in Future State is the potential shattered alternative realities of whatever, even though most of these alternative realities fit into one continuity. Whatever. Just parts of it frustrate me. That I just don't think that was the route to go. I get why they did it. I get the full functionality of it. But what I will say this, and this isn't just a knock on it, my bigger beef with not only did they not tell us that this was this important, I felt like they crammed about 2 or 3 issues of functional storytelling into the middle of one issue that felt so convoluted. It felt like, Scott Snyder walked out to get like coffee and Grant Morrison came in and changed everything. And
right. And they're like, who is this man and why can't I understand what he's saying? What is he doing?
Because all of a sudden, when you get to like issue 7 of Death Metal and all the bajillion tie-ins, it went from being, okay, this is wacky but understandable, to being completely incoherent. I got a vibe towards the end of Death Metal. And on a side note, I read all the tie-ins. There's all my money too. But
oh, poor money.
Poor money. It's okay. LTN buys all of our comic books.
Yeah, we should renegotiate that.
No, they don't. But they are loving to us.
They don't.
They don't. My wife was like, "How much did you just spend at the shop?" She like saw me walk out with like a truckload of comics. I was like, $50. And she's like, well, that's not bad for a whole month. And I'm like, oh, baby girl. I'm like, baby girl, that's this week. And she's like, oh. Anyway, I'm way on my trails. But that being said, I felt like it got incoherent. And for all of this to be based out of that is like basing the entire DCEU on Green Lantern. It's just like
just don't make the suit green.
No, I'm saying on that Green Lantern movie. Giving us Future State as a repercussion of Death Metal is like basing all future DC movies on the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie. It's not a solid foundation. Okay.
But there's a reason you actually liked Future State Wonder Woman #1, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. And by the way, I've liked most of the Future State books. I'm just not going to talk about all of them for the picks. You can hit me up on the on the community, and we can discuss them all day long. But Wonder Woman #1,
I'm the same. But hit us.
Yeah, Wonder Woman #1, straight up, you needed no prior knowledge. You didn't need to know anything about Diana. You just needed to know that there is a young, sassy, what feels like millennial Wonder Woman trying to step into the gauntlets and boots, who doesn't quite have her I'm a majestic warrior act down together. And it's ridiculously fun. It feels, okay, this is going to sound like a dumb comparison, but it feels like a little bit of Legally Blonde and like the Princess Diaries and Clueless put in a blender and thrown into Wonder Woman.
Whoa.
Of like, she's not inept, she's not incapable, but she does not fit the beauty, majesty, grace, and self-righteousness that accompanies Diana Prince. At all. Like, she's chewing gum, blowing bubbles, and my favorite part of the first issue, because that's the only issue that's out right now, my favorite part of the first issue is she stabs a dragon with a sword, and then as she flies by on a Pegasus that had like a hilarious name. Hold on. Now, where's the book? I'll flip through it. Nope, I don't have it. There is a Pegasus whose name is like Gregory or something. Like, it's this really mundane name. I can't remember his actual name, but it was like Bobby or Gregory or something like that. but she's like yelling at the Pegasus because it won't come help her. But as she pulls a sword from a dragon, she says, and I quote, "Yoink."
And did she yeet the dragon afterwards, or
very, very much so? I mean, like that was in there, but she straight up flew by on a Pegasus and went yoink, and I literally just like fell over on the couch laughing. It was a delightful read. It was a lot of fun. It's one of those, this is good enough. I would buy this all day long. Like, I would say, put this in my pull box. I will read this until the writer and artist team leaves. Because it was that good. I am mad that I'm waiting this far to get to it, because like it feels like forever since that first issue dropped. And then I missed buying Immortal Wonder Woman #1 because I didn't realize there was another Wonder Woman book, and I thought it was just the same thing with like a different cover. And I was like, oh crap.
I'm not gonna lie, after I got home from the shop, I actually printed the checklist because I was like, I'm getting distracted and I need to figure this out. And I'm not usually the checklist guy, but here I am crossing things off on a checklist.
I went to go pick up, this week's books, and like straight up went to 3 different shops and still managed to leave without Superman versus Imperious Lex. And I had to go to another shop to get it, which, by the way, that was a delightful read as well. Surprisingly, but I'm moving on. Homesick Pilots is one of my favorite books, kicked off at the end of last year. And it feels like a cross between The Haunting of Hill House and Quantum Leap a little bit. Or 13 Ghosts a little bit more accurately than Haunting of Hill House. It starts off like Scott Pilgrim as a book, but 2 warring bands go into a haunted house. One band is completely devoured by the evil house, and the lead singer of the main band, which is called Homesick Pilots, becomes the entity. No, what's the word? The avatar of the haunted house. That there are chunks of evil, possession, demonic spirits, whatever, that belong in that haunted house that have made its way into the world. And so this haunted house is sending out the lead singer in a new pseudo-corporeal body to wrangle down the wayward ghosts and bring them back to the house. And in yes, in the first issue, you have literally no idea what's happening. You just see punk rock band, and like a very well done scene of horror in a house, and you have no clue what's happening. The second issue starts off with the girl who was devoured by the house, like being sent to track down the thing and brings it back. And honestly, when she brings it back, it's terrifying. Like, she has this thing, like she's helping a kind, misunderstood house, and you can, as the reader, tell she's in some serious, malevolent, hot garbage and in danger. And it's a wonder to read. I've loved every minute of it. There are 2 issues. Issue 2 came out in January. You should check it out. You should be able to find it. There are second printings, I believe.
Let me write that down.
I had to go to 3 different shops within the hour it dropped to find it. Because it did so well and it sold out at all the major shops near me. So yeah, Homesick Pilots. There's 2 issues out. Read it. Breathe. Okay, cool, go dark. All right.
Yeah, you got this.
In the midst of the 93,000 DC titles of Future State that have subsequently caused me to like refinance my mortgage, comes Tom King's Batman and Catwoman, which is like, it's so, right. It's like a straight up breath of fresh air. Like, oh, look, normal and beautiful.
Just kidding.
But it's so, because I miss Tom King writing Batman. It's been nice in Strange Adventures, but I miss Tom King just doing Batman. And this is the long continuation of Tom King's Batman story. This is originally what we would have gotten as the conclusion to that. And honestly, I see why, with the pandemic pause, that this happened this way. If you remember when, comics went on pause, it makes a lot more sense to have rushed the other Joker War storyline than give us this, because you needed the Joker War storyline to get to where we are in Future State. And this all takes place part of the story takes place years after Tom King's Batman run. In fact, half of the story takes place after Batman has died, which if you if you read Tom King's Batman stuff, you know that part of the story actually ends with Selina and Bruce eventually getting married, living out their lives together, and her being by his deathbed as he quietly passes away with his whole family there lovingly beside him, which is a wonderful ending.
Yeah, that was an annual, and then making the connection to the current read, I've been pretty ecstatic about it too. It's like, it's Bat and Cat retirement style and whatnot, but it's so much more than that.
And it also gives us our first, and here's the thing, I think this was originally continuity. Like, originally this was supposed to be the official timeline for Tom King.
So buried in the news over the last couple weeks that, didn't have time to catch up on was Tom King said that there were two things that he demanded, but also was required to go all the way to the top of editorial with. And everyone assumes that this is one of them.
So
probably why it ended up being outside.
So does that make it continuity or not?
Most likely not. And because of what happened in issue 2.
Right. And I feel that, but I would be happy if that was continuity. But this is our first real.
Yeah, we won't spoil that for anyone, but that's a big one, and that's why everyone's like, I mean, for me, it's good on you, Tom King. You went to editorial with a big one.
Yeah.
You still got shot down, but you still got to tell it, but not in the way you wanted.
Yeah. Again, if this was canon, I'm fine. Totally happy.
Me too.
But,
for real.
But this is our first real appearance in comic form beyond adaptation of Phantasm. The character from the animated movie.
That was really cool.
Yeah, and see, I want that part to be canon. But we actually get to see the story of Phantasm returning to the DC Comics world. So half of the story is Bruce, Selina, and Phantasm. Half of the story is Selina in her Golden Girls age years visiting the Joker in a trailer park in Florida or somewhere near Florida or something. Reminiscing about the old days. And that's issue 1. I'm not going to mention anything in issue 2 for spoiler sake, but it's a beautiful story. It's well drawn. But man, I'm loving it. And I just miss Tom King's storytelling on Batman. So that being said, Rorschach is weird, and Strange Adventures is not. It is. Rorschach is weird. Strange Adventures is not Mr. Miracle, but Bat and Cat's still wonderful.
Yep.
And I'll go ahead and just end on this statement for the polls. Batman Future State Next Batman #1. I honestly am not here to talk about the actual storyline. I'm here to talk about the B section. Where we get a whole arc of the Arkham Warriors led by Astrid Arkham, where you've got Two-Face, Killer Croc, and all these people living like noble knights fighting the oppression of the magistrate. I would read this book all day long. I would get action figures. I love it. That one little section, that like little 4 pages at the back of the book, sign me the heck up. I am here for it. And some of the B sections are great. Some of them I hate. But I'm not going to put time into that. But the one with Astrid Arkham at the end of the next Batman #1 is worth buying.
It was really good.
Like, even if you take out the whole Tim Fox Batman thing, and by the way, he's not bad. It's just I'm not invested yet. But Astrid Arkham,
they didn't give us enough.
And most comics readers, even like hard nerdcore folk, don't even know who Tim Fox is. I mean, he's barely mentioned and barely exists. If they would have given it to Luke, that'd be different. But like,
yes, for that, or then just on the other side that they left the signal in place instead of bumping him up, so it just caused all kinds of. I found it interesting because I was like, oh, I thought this would be slightly easier than it was going to be, but I think you're right. We need another issue to really get a feel for it. And I mean, I'll just caveat onto that my 2 favorite in Future State so far, because I'm the weird nerd, that the Swamp Thing issue I thought was really cool. And then the reveal at the end of that of kind of something that they're piecing together in their world post metal is really interesting. I was like, oh, that's cool. You like went old school and like all the things, and that makes me feel very swampy, and I dig it.
Oh yes.
But also Dark Detective was just great.
I enjoyed it. I really did.
And same thing, the B side of the issues there were really good too.
Next Batman #2 actually had a Jason Todd B-side, which was wonderful. And I know I didn't put this in my list, and it's your turn. I'm going to shut up, though. Catwoman #1 was actually wonderful. It literally is Catwoman pulling a train job, like very Firefly.
Oh, and that's cool.
Yeah. But she's leading a resistance movement. And the resistance movement literally looked at her. She's like, this isn't exactly your thing. Why are you doing this? She's like, mount up, let's roll. And like, she's leading a train job assault, and it's beautiful. If the Catwoman we got in Catwoman #1 was the normal Catwoman, I'd read that junk.
So I think my last piece on Future State is just this. We've talked a lot about it, but it's because there's been a lot going on there. Is the creative teams of almost every single book might not always be huge names you've heard of, but they are all doing something somewhere right now in comics, and they are really well paired. That there's stuff that originally I was kind of like, I don't care, but then I opened the book and went, it is gorgeous. The art is amazing across the Future State slate. That there's some really cool panels in a lot of these books. So if you're just looking for something fresh, as weird as it is that it would fall in like this future DC slate type thing, you need to pick up a few of these books and just flip through them, because you might trip across something that's just utterly amazing. There's tons of artists that we've mentioned over the last couple years on this show that are all doing major books, and I've just put it all out there. So take the time to flip through one and see something that strikes your fancy. But I'm going to be weird and different because Hector's right. I took all the Marvel books. But for January, it would be remiss if we didn't mention Daredevil, because we are going to talk about Daredevil until Chip Zdarsky stops writing it, apparently. But we've been talking all the way through all the craziness that's been going on with Daredevil. Daredevil's gone to Washington. Daredevil has tried to get himself killed multiple times. He started this whole journey by making the mistake of murdering someone, which is new for him.
Manslaughtering.
And someone. That's what he pled to. Yes, that he pled down.
Murder includes intent. So
that's true. It was accidental. But Daredevil 25, we finally see the end of all that, and Daredevil puts on the jumpsuit and goes to prison as Daredevil because he won that Supreme Court case that says he's allowed to do that. So no one still knows that he's Matt Murdock. He's in prison and there's nobody outside taking care of stuff. And big old spoiler alerts because people own the internet and by now you know, but we're going to talk about it briefly here. So this is where you click stop or pause. Someone else shows up taking up the mantle. And we've seen a few false starts during this of, the neighborhood like coughed up tons of different Daredevil lookalikes earlier in the run. But we get a big old splash page of a woman donning the Daredevil get up in her own way. And it's someone we all know and love. Again, spoilers, this is where you stop listening. And we find Elektra standing there as the new Daredevil. And I'm going to admit that as a Daredevil fan up front, I kind of went, I don't know. I still don't because they're going very slow on the how is this going to work or not work kind of thing. But she seems to actually care, which is a unique thing for Elektra because usually, even though she does keep coming back and there's the semblance of caring about Matt, she kind of usually does serve.
This is the most sincere Elektra we've seen.
Right. And that's kind of my thing is I was like, yeah, you're not supposed to be this person. So I don't hate it. And so feel free to at me on that one and talk about it. But I think at least the moment, I'm okay with it. And it's pretty neat.
I like there's it a lot.
There's a lot of cool stuff going on here that's just weird. But speaking of weird and issue 25s that are really weird, the brown coat that I am didn't stop reading Firefly, despite it being really odd and really kind of broken for like the last 10 plus issues. Well, Hector, I know you dropped off a while ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you picked back up, but 25 is technically a restart. If you didn't know, it is. They jump a fair amount of time into the future. And all the stuff that's happened is true, but in the past. And we're getting kind of a new look at the team. The makeup has changed a bit. And something absolutely bonkers occurred at the end of this issue that someone may not be dead, that we're sure was dead. And this issue finally felt like Firefly again to me.
Even though it's far future.
Even though it's really different, I think it's on that. It's almost that because they're not trying to be something that it's not, that maybe Pac finally found his grounding and I get it, but I can kind of go new. And I have a feeling that if they stay on this thing, I might actually be interested again. So if you gave up on Firefly, pick it up again at 25 and tell me what you think, because it is bonkers and there's some moments in there that I know will make Hector happy. So hopefully they don't screw it up is the best way to put it. Yeah, it feels like Firefly again, and I really hope they don't lose that feeling is the best way for me to put it.
Okay.
Also on my stuff, I've been reading Amazing Spider-Man for a while now.
Me too. I think I pushed you onto that.
I do believe this is your fault.
Okay.
Because we started around Sin Eater and you were before that. But following that whole arc out and now the first couple issues on the other side of that whole thing, I'm still there. Nick Spencer's doing a great job that honestly, I usually get burnt out on Spider-Man because you walk in and there's like 47 Spider books on the shelf and you're like, no. It's kind of like X-Men that you're like, stop it. Just give me a story, not 47 side stories. And they did that through Last Remains and through a lot of the things, but I'm really happy reading an Amazing Spider-Man book right now and Peter Parker being who he is. And there's bonkers stuff going on, but it feels like the Spider-Man that you kind of expect, that he's kind of in that journey of I don't know what to do, but things are bonkers, and
it's tying the past in well without you having to have a full indoctrinated knowledge.
Right. Yep. No, that as long as you have a very cursory knowledge of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, you're not going to feel lost, or they're not going to make you feel dumb about what's going on. Now, there's 47 side characters that all have their own books present in parts of the story, but you're not missing anything. Trust me. It's well drawn for what it is right now, and I think it's the departure I need right now, and it just feels like comics, which is good. So I don't hate that at all. It's the
best. It's the best feeling Spider-Man book since Ultimate Spider-Man, personally. Ultimate Spider-Man was the most fun to pick up to me since like the 90s. And this is the first thing that feels that organic since Ultimate Spider-Man.
That's fair. And so finally, I'm going to end my polls on, if you have not been reading Donny Cates' book Crossover, you are missing something that I don't even know fully how to describe. I'm still trying to figure out how he's getting away making the references as directly as he is in these books without someone losing all of the money just in trying to tell the story and licensing. But the concept of crossover is literally that the world of comic books is real, and it collided directly with the real world in a moment of time, creating a cataclysm of comic book stuff. Superheroes, normal people, and the monsters and villains crossed into the real world, and we dropped a big old dome over it and said, cool, y'all stay there, because that was crazy. And we meet an individual on the outside who comes in contact with a little girl who is a comic book character that somehow got out, and she's trying to get home, and that's where you're at in the story. And there's crazy religious cults, which I'll just warn you up front that Donnie's opinion on the church is not hidden anywhere in the writing of this series. But it's kind of a Westboro Baptist feel of the church, and it's basically, they're demonizing all the comic book characters. And there's lots of tropes around that are uncomfortable, and all of us are very aware of them. But the bigger thing is this concept of comic book characters in our world and everything. And like I said, he's not just like being like above surface level. He has referenced multiple major comics by name, characters by name. Some have appeared in picture in a book that by a company that doesn't own any of them, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I think it's the issue of you can reference them, but you can't necessarily do them, so a lot of the characters are just different enough. But in issue 3, you kind of start getting more of the story, and a Doctor Strange analog shows up, but he's much more Doctor Strange as if he lived in a Donny Cates world, and it is everything that you would think that means, and is quite fun. But one of the things they talk about in the Cataclysm is the giant squid that falls upon Manhattan, killing millions of people, and that the whole world was supposed to become united against this monster. Sound familiar? Should. That he literally retells the Watchmen story, and again, for the 47th time, we see it in its glory, destroying things, and seems to make perfect sense. Come on, Zach, you didn't have to nuke Manhattan. Give us the giant squid. That's all I'm saying. But it's just a bonkers book. It's okay,
he's putting the squid in the Snyder Cut.
That makes sense. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. So if you want just an absolutely bonkers book, Crossover is definitely someplace that you need to spend time. So that's pretty much my poll. And I think before we peace out on this episode, we should give some folks a feel of a couple number ones that snuck in January. And then you guys are just going to have to wait for the next episode for us to talk more about some of the cinematic stuff. Yes, we watched Wonder Woman 84. that happened. And we're watching WandaVision, but we should probably spend more time than just a couple minutes talking about what's going on in WandaVision for all of you that are curious.
We'll come back there in a couple weeks.
So we'll come back because, literally as we record, new episodes are dropping and, the world is literally changing around Wanda and Vision. So before we go, let's talk number ones.
We here at LTN Radio know that not everybody is nerdy in the same ways. You might find yourself in a situation where you hear a word or phrase that you've never seen before and have no idea what it means. Well, have no fear. We're here to help. Today's term is Arkham. No, not the Arkham that you might recognize from Gotham and Batman, nor the video game series based in the same thing. No, we're talking about the fictional city of Arkham, situated in Massachusetts, an integral part of the Lovecraft Country setting created by H.P. Lovecraft. Arkham is featured in many of his stories and those of the other Cthulhu mythos writers. Arkham is the home of Miskatonic University, which features prominently in many of Lovecraft's works. The institution finances the expeditions in the novellas At the Mountains of Madness and The Shadow Out of Time. Walter Gilman of The Dreams in the Witch House attends classes at the university, and other notable institutions in Arkham are the Arkham Historical Society and the Arkham Sanitarium, which many believe to be the inspiration for Arkham Asylum in the Batman canon. The inspiration for Arkham appears to be, in fact, Salem, Massachusetts, its reputation for the occult appearing to one who dabbles in the weird tale. Arkham's most notable characteristics are its gambrel roofs and the dark legends that have surrounded the city for centuries. The disappearance of children at May Eve and other bad doings are accepted as a part of life for the poorer citizens of the city. Which again also kind of sounds like Gotham. Jeez, Batman, get your own stuff. I'm Radio Mad, and I hope I've made your life just a little bit nerdier.
So, on your number one track, what is the thing that in February came out with a number one next to it, other than Future State, clearly? Because come on, Hector, your entire poll was this week's number one. How dare you? Yeah, that's fine. But what's the one that you were like, wow, that caught me off guard? You should read it.
Maestro, War and Pax, number one, dropped recently. I've enjoyed the first Maestro arc. Him doing some despicable stuff to Hercules was fun. But
that was fun.
War and Pax is him as the ruler dealing with people, dealing with the remnants, sicking robot dogs on children. I mean, it's setting up like Maestro Hulk as the like indomitable force that he is in Legend, and I'm enjoying it. So that's a good one.
Ooh, that's cool. I really enjoyed kind of that first run that led up to it. I thought the Hercules, all of it was just bonkers, and in all of the good ways, in all of the very Marvel ways, I should say. That a Donny Cates level bonkers and a Marvel bonkers are not on the same level of bonkers. I guess I need to create a scale so that makes much more sense to our listeners. Or I just need to get a thesaurus out before I start talking. I don't know. One of those two things. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty fun. So I guess this is another one of I shouldn't have stopped reading it, and Hector's going to throw things at me until I do. So I should add that one to mine. So my number one, because we haven't had enough Star Wars in general in the last few months. We had lots of Star Wars, the War of the Stars, but Star Wars: The High Republic, number one, came out, and the High Republic is, basically going back before everything that we currently have and everything, and it's supposed to be the grand time of literally the High Republic, that the Jedi are still functioning as those arbiters of peace and light throughout the galaxy, that it's a time of peace. It's not a time of war. It's not a time of potential collapse or anything. And honestly, what's been fun about that in that context is we get new Jedi. And we get to hear more of the deeper lore of what makes them who they are, how they function, how they operate. But we are given some new characters to follow and to learn from, a Padawan and a Master. And spoiler alert, but that Padawan becomes a Jedi Master by the end of the first issue. And so, Anakin, I don't know what your beef is, but you clearly screwed it up, homie, because apparently it's not that hard. Maybe it is. I don't know. But it's a pretty book. It's Star Wars, but we're also being given, once again, super amazing, strong female Jedi. So this constant argument of there's not great female Jedi, well, we now have yet another one, and she's pretty awesome, and I dig it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the story kind of centers around a Padawan that's literally just transitioned from Padawan to Master, not expecting to do so. So I think it's literally going to be one of those coming of age stories, but for a Jedi Master, and that's kind of wild. So
I picked up the hardback Sule book. I picked up the comic too, but I'm like 2 chapters into the hardback. It's kind of a bummer he's not involved in the comic projects, but he decided to write the heft of the book, so I'm down. I want to see what he brings to that as well, because that should be interesting. I want to see him in long form, so might be able to kind of hang that right there as well. But fam, we got our first episode of the new LTN Podcast Network season all wrapped up. So that's us done here at the Pull List Podcast. Episode 46 is in the books. It's now in your ears. But we couldn't possibly do this alone. As many of you know, we take this epic journey of podcasts and fandom with lots of others amazing podcasts here at the Love Thy Nerd Podcast Network. So be sure to visit lovethynerd.com for more info, previous episodes, and find yourself a new show to add to your routine. Back when we started, there were only 3 of us. Now we're just growing and growing. There's LTN radio and all kinds of stuff. So there's lots of stuff to get excited about, fam. So be sure to check all those out. But honestly, deep down in our heart, Hector and I just want to thank you all for choosing us as your primary comic book knowledge factory on that near weekly basis. So don't leave us hanging. Rate and review the show on your podcasting app of choice. We're on the iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and many more. But ultimately, thanks for listening, guys. And remember, kids, read more comics.
You've been listening to the Pull List Podcast with Chris Poirier and Hector Mira, part of the Love Thy Nerd Podcast Network. Be sure to rate and review the show and share on all the social media.